In the quiet dawn of Miami, death came dressed in white. One moment of silence, one pull of the trigger, and the legend of the Black Widow came to its end. Her name was Griselda Blanco. To some, she was a cocaine godmother. To others, the woman who built an empire from fear. But behind every myth lies a truth darker than imagination. Before the diamonds, before the mansions, there was only survival. Griselda Blanco Restrepo was born in Cartagena, Colombia, 1943, a time and place where dreams often died before they began. Her mother worked the streets. Her father was long gone. By 11, Griselda had already learned the law of her world. Power belonged to those who took it. Local whispers tell a chilling story, that she once kidnapped a neighborhood child for ransom. When the money never came, she made sure no one ever forgot the name Griselda Blanco. Whether myth or truth, one thing was certain: she was no longer afraid. She ran away to Medellin, a city of saints, sinners, and smugglers. Here, she found her teachers not in classrooms, but in crime. In every shadow, there's a story the world tried to forget. Tales of power, obsession, and the choices that turned ordinary lives into legends of crime. Here, we don't just tell those stories. We uncover the truth buried beneath them, the parts too chilling to fade. So if you've made it this far, don't just pass by. Subscribe, share your comment as we dive deeper into the darkness. Because the next story might be the one that keeps you awake tonight. The sun was sinking low over Medellin, casting long shadows through narrow streets lined with market stalls and the smell of ripe fruit and diesel fumes. When a woman stepped out of the butcher shop for what would be the last time, Griselda Blanco, 69 years old, once the most feared woman in the Western Hemisphere, now carrying a bag of meat in one hand and a quiet life in the other. No guards, no entourage, just a bodyguard and the ghost of a past no one dared mention aloud. She had been free, from prison for years, exiled back to Colombia after decades of domination and infamy. But freedom was never her ally. It was her sentence. She had lived too long, made too many enemies, taken too many crowns that didn't belong to her. A motorcycle approached from behind, the kind she had once used as her own signature. The whisper of tires, the growl of the engine, the sharp echo of 2 quick shots. And just like that, the Black Widow fell, the queen of cocaine silenced by the very method she had created. People screamed. Vendors ducked. One of them crossed himself as he looked down at her, the woman who once ruled Miami like a monarch of blood, now motionless in gutter, a crimson line tracing toward the curb. The motorcycle was gone before the echo faded. No one came forward with answers. No witnesses beyond frightened whispers. No suspects. No arrests, just irony, pure and cold, served by fate or revenge, depending on who you asked. But the question that lingered, who finally dared to pull the trigger on a woman who had outlived nearly everyone she'd ever crossed, who had the power or the audacity to end the story of Griselda Blanco? Because if you trace her path back, through decades of terror, power, and empire, you find a woman who rose from poverty to become the architect of Miami's cocaine explosion, a woman who changed the face of organized crime and destroyed nearly everyone who stood in her way. And yet, it didn't start with violence. It started with survival. Rewind the clock. 3 decades earlier, back to Colombia's port cities, back to the alleys of Cartagena, where a barefoot girl learned that power is taken and not given. The world knew her as a ruthless drug lord, but few knew where that fire came from. Griselda Blanco Restrepo was born in 1943 into a world that offered her nothing. No father figure, no safety, no comfort, only hunger and the chaos of the streets. By her teens, she had already seen more brutality than most men twice her age. She ran away from home, her life reduced to scams, theft, and the daily gamble of staying alive. Some say she began with kidnapping. Others claim she was already running small hustles before she was even 15. Either way, the pattern was clear. Griselda learned that mercy had no currency in her world. Fear did. She made her way to Medellin, a city that would later become the beating heart of the cocaine empire. But in the 1960s, it was just another place to disappear. She found herself drawn into petty smuggling circles, black market cigarettes, counterfeit passports. She forged documents with the precision of a craftsman and the coldness of someone who didn't believe in luck. That's where she met Carlos Trujillo, her first husband, a small-time trafficker who saw in Griselda both beauty and danger. Together they built minor operations. But it wasn't love that drove her, it was ambition. Trujillo was useful, until he wasn't. Rumors say he tried to cheat her. Others whisper he grew afraid of what she was becoming. Either way, he vanished. No one could ever prove what happened. But people learned quickly not to cross her. By her mid-20s, she had married again, this time to Alberto Bravo, a man connected, charismatic, and already dabbling in the cocaine trade. Together they found something that would change history. The perfect storm of opportunity, Colombian coca leaves, and American demand. Smuggling cocaine into the United States wasn't new, but Griselda saw what others didn't. The loopholes, the human routes, the art of hiding in plain sight. She invented methods that were as ingenious as they were invisible. Women disguised as tourists, carrying drugs sewn into lingerie and heels. Airport officials never suspected a thing. She called them her mules, and within months, her network began flowing through New York like a silent river of white gold. Money poured in faster than they could count it. Her operation stretched from Medellin to Miami to Queens. Yet for Griselda, it was never enough. Control mattered more than wealth. Fear was her true currency. And soon, that currency bought her everything. Mansions, jewelry, men with guns. But it also bought paranoia. Because the higher she climbed, the more she feared to fall. It happened one night in Bogota, a nightclub parking lot. Griselda confronted Alberto Bravo. Rumors said he was stealing from her. Others said he planned to leave her. Either way, the meeting ended in gunfire. When the smoke cleared, Bravo lay dead. Griselda stood bleeding but alive. Her empire now hers alone. The woman who would one day terrorize Miami had just killed the man who built her fortune. And she didn't flinch. By the late 1970s, Griselda Blanco was no longer a smuggler. She was a queen. She moved her base to Miami, a city about to become ground zero for one of the most violent drug wars in American history. Miami looked like paradise, but beneath the palm trees was a city split between wealth and chaos. Planes from Colombia landed with bricks of cocaine hidden in luggage, engines, and sometimes human bodies. Demand was insatiable, and the profits were unimaginable. Griselda's network expanded with surgical precision. Every shipment timed, every distributor controlled. She trusted few, but those she did were rewarded beyond measure. The U.S. government called it the cocaine cowboy era. Fast cars, blood on the pavement, cash raining like confetti. And in the shadows of it all, one woman held the crown. They called her La Madrina, the godmother. Her reach was so vast that even rival cartels whispered her name with caution. She ruled through loyalty, but also through terror, assassinations in daylight, debt collectors who never came back, disappearances no one dare question. What made her different from the men around her was not cruelty. It was precision. She didn't act out of rage. She acted out of principle. Betrayal had a price, and she made sure it was always paid in full. Her signature became infamous. Killers on motorcycles, two men, helmets down, silent until the moment of impact. It was efficient, effective, and terrifying. It was Griselda's calling card. Miami newspapers began counting bodies. The DA began connecting dots. But none could stop the tidal wave she'd unleashed. In a city built on greed and glamour, she was the unseen ruler, one who lived like a ghost but whose shadow touched every street corner. Her rivals either joined her or vanished. Her lieutenants carried both loyalty and fear in equal measure. The year was 1980, and Miami shimmered with money and menace. The air thick with perfume, gunpowder, and the quiet hum of deals that could buy a lifetime or end one in seconds. Griselda Blanco had become a ghost in high heels, the unseen architect of fortune flowing through nightclubs, marinas, and glittering mansions. She didn't appear in photographs, yet her influence was carved into every corner of the city. Agents at the DA called her the woman no one sees, whispers on tapped phones, rumors from informants who vanished before giving full names. Every lead pointed to her, but evidence slid through their fingers like smoke. How do you prosecute myth? Her organization operated like a machine, mules, distributors, accountants, enforcers, each one trained to know only a fragment of the picture. If one fell, the others kept running. Money moved through offshore accounts, fake import companies, and nightclubs where champagne hid the scent of cash. And behind it all was Griselda, calculating, impossibly calm. She lived in a mansion with bulletproof glass and emerald chandeliers. But her comfort was laced with paranoia. She trusted no one for long. Stories circulated among her crew, how she rewarded loyalty with cars, diamonds, or a new home, and betrayal with disappearance. She didn't raise her voice. She simply gave an order. Those orders turned Miami into a war zone. Drive-by shootings, ambushes at traffic lights, entire families fleeing the city. Each headline another warning that La Madrina's patience was thin. But while law enforcement saw carnage, Griselda saw strategy. Every rival eliminated meant territory reclaimed. Every frightened competitor meant higher prices. She wasn't reckless. She was methodical. Still, every kingdom breeds dissent. Inside her circle, ambition began to whisper. Men who once swore loyalty started counting their own millions and imagining life without her. Griselda noticed she always noticed. And when she felt betrayal brewing, she acted first. One evening, an associate failed to return from a business dinner. His car was found abandoned, engine still warm. No one asked questions. Griselda never repeated warnings. Yet outside her empire, a storm was forming. The DA's Miami task force had finally drawn a web on the wall. Photographs, phone numbers, coded ledgers, all pointing toward one central node. The woman known only as the Black Widow. She wasn't invisible anymore. By 1981, the violence reached a point the press could no longer ignore. Newspapers printed names of victims, maps of shootings, timelines of chaos. Civic leaders demanded answers. Television anchors spoke the phrase cocaine cowboys with both fascination and fear. But the woman behind it stayed untouchable until greed cracked her armor from within. Her third husband, Dario Sepulveda, had been both lover and lieutenant. He handled logistics, protected her youngest son, and believed himself equal to her. He wasn't. And when he tried to take their son and leave for Colombia, Griselda's fury turned surgical. Investigators later found evidence of calls, coded messages, quiet payments. Within weeks, Dario was gone, shot in the streets of Medellin. Witnesses claimed a child was there to see it. Her own child, Michael Corleone Blanco, named after a movie gangster she admired. If true, it showed how little distance existed between her business and her blood. Family and empire had become the same thing, and she would offend both with the same cold resolve. Law enforcement now had motive, witnesses, and a new determination. The DEA coordinated with the FBI and local police, launching Operation Los Niños, an undercover effort to map the flow of her product from Colombia to Florida and California. Agents infiltrated courier networks, flipped small-time dealers, and built a case designed not to arrest just one woman, but to crush an entire system. For Griselda, the signs were there, the watches outside her homes, the coded messages had stopped arriving. But arrogance is a slow poison. She'd evaded death too many times to believe it could touch her again. So when agents surrounded her Irvine, California house in 1985, she was caught off guard. No shootout, no dramatic chase, just the sound of handcuffs closing on a legend. Inside, investigators found ledgers linking her to millions in cocaine profits, enough to put her behind bars for decades. Yet the murders that haunted her reputation proved harder to pin down. Witnesses recanted. Evidence evaporated. Fear worked for her, even in absentia. She was convicted on trafficking charges and sentenced to more than 10 years in federal prison. The empire blood had finally met the law. But even confined behind steel and concrete, her myth only grew. Rumors spread that she was orchestrating hits from her cell. Other inmates whispered her name with a mix of awe and dread. Guards described her as polite, almost gentle, proof, perhaps, that monsters were ordinary faces. Outside, Miami changed. The cocaine route shifted. Younger traffickers rose. Men who had once trembled at her orders now carved their own empires. But they all borrowed pages from her playbook. Methods, discipline, ruthlessness, whether they admitted it or not. Every one of them carried a piece of her legacy. When Griselda walked out of prison in 2004, older, quieter, her dark hair streaked with gray, few recognized her. She had outlived her sons, her husbands, and most of her enemies. Reported back to Medellin, she told reporters she wanted peace, church, family, redemption. For nearly 8 years, she managed it. No headlines, no violence, just silence. The ghost of an era fading into obscurity. But peace, for someone like her, was never a natural state. It was an intermission, because in the criminal underworld, debts never stay buried. They wait. September 3rd, 2012, a warm evening in the Belen district of Medellin. Traffic slowed near a small butcher shop. A woman, elderly but still sharp-eyed, stepped outside carrying a plastic bag. People remember the smell of roasted meat, the quiet of late afternoon, and then the low growl of a motorcycle. 2 shots, and history repeated itself. The same method she perfected decades earlier. The same swift, efficient silence. Witnesses froze, unsure if they'd just seen justice or irony. Her body lay still, the street echoing with sirens. Police cordoned the scene. Reporters arrived. Neighbors whispered. One phrase over and over. La Madrina ha muerto. The godmother is dead. Yet even then, questions refused to die. Who ordered it? Was it revenge from an old rival, or a symbolic gesture from a new generation closing the chapter she began? Could it be that someone she once protected had decided the legend needed an ending? Investigators followed leads, but none survived the light. Every name vanished into rumor. And here's the haunting part. Griselda Blanco's story didn't end with her. Her methods, her mindset, her myths still ripple to the trade she once commanded. Modern cartels trace their discipline, their fear-based loyalty, to her blueprint. Films and documentaries turn her life into entertainment. But beneath every dramatization lies a truth colder than fiction. Power built on fear doesn't disappear. It just changes hands. So when you hear about another untouchable figure rise in the shadows, remember, the ghosts of the past never sleep. They simply wait for someone bold or foolish enough to call them back. And somewhere in the echo of a motorcycle's engine cutting through a narrow Medellin street, you can almost hear her laughter, low, distant, and final. But even empires built on fear have cracks, and Griselda's were beginning to show. If the untold crime keep you awake, don't miss what's next. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the untold stories hiding behind the headlines. Every secret has a story, and hey, nothing stays hidden for long.